What may have at one point seemed like it would have been a short, dominant series between Ant-Man's Timberwolves and the Joker-led Nuggets has quickly turned into one of the most exciting narratives in the NBA this season, as these two freight trains prepare to run into each other one last time in a Game 7, and only one team will make it out. Now, excuse me for mixing Marvel and DC with this Ant-Man versus Joker matchup, but it's become really easy and fun to see these two players and their respective teams as a hero versus villain matchup. The lack of deep playoff runs gives the Wolves that underdog story that makes people love sports movies. Nobody expected them to be here at the start of the year, but hey, if the Mighty Ducks can take down the Hawks at the end of the movie after getting pummeled 1,000,000,000 in the first matchup, or if the Toon Squad can find a way to win, then why wouldn't we want to see the same thing happen in front of our eyes in real life with this Timberwolves squad? It's been a rough era for Minnesota Athletics, but with the Twins having finally broken their playoff losing streak and the Timberwolves only needing one game to advance to the conference finals, maybe the sun is rising over Minneapolis. Today is Friday, May 15th. I'm Matt Menson, and welcome to the Cornfield Sports Pod. As always, or almost always, because I guess I was solo last week, we got Blake Peterson.
Yes.
Let's get right into this. Western Conference semifinals. We're going to Game 7 here with the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver
Nut.
Nuggets.
And absolute nuts. Like I did expect like to go to a game 7, but
Dude,
I'm
I
honestly
didn't
ready.
either. After the Timberwolves were up 2-0 last week, they were looking good. They were looking real good when I did the show last week. Up 2-0 and just rocking and rolling on a 6-game playoff winning streak. And then they dropped 3 in a row to the Nuggets. Um,
Then uh, then all of a sudden like they shoot a half court shot in front of Kevin Harlan and Kevin Harlan goes like, "Got it. Got it."
yep, that's how that goes. But yeah, no, to go from winning 6 straight playoff games to dropping 3 in a row like that, that's crazy. And the first two of which were at the Target Center too. They weren't at Ball Arena. So the Timberwolves dropped those first 2 losses in front of their home crowd. Um, and Denver took them out of it pretty early in both cases. Um, that second one especially was defined by a 12-0 run in the first quarter. There was the rest of the game was fairly even. Aside from that, no other major runs or droughts by either team. Consistent, steady scoring throughout the course of the game, and that just kind of shows, this is playoff basketball. This is as intense as it's gonna get, and even one dry spell can kill you. Um, and then again, that next loss, the Nuggets, all Nikola Jokic, 40-point double double. The guy couldn't miss. I mean, go take a look at that highlight reel. If you haven't seen this, he was hitting some absolutely absurd shots over Rudy Gobert. Well guarded, well contested shots. I mean, I don't know. You're not going to make shots like that. You're not going to do that twice in a single series. Or if you do, well, I guess you would deserve the MVP. But Jokic got the MVP. So that's kind of where we're standing there. But it's been an interesting case because Jokic is the MVP. He's got some of the best offensive ability in the NBA, especially down in the post. I mean, he's a big guy, but he's been guarded by Rudy Gobert primarily in this series, who's the defensive player of the year. It's made for a crazy match, and some of these games, Gobert has done an effective job at shutting Jokic down. We'll talk about last night's game in just a second here. But other nights, Jokic has completely had Gobert's number. It's it's been an interesting case to watch these two go at it repeatedly over the course of the last couple weeks in these 6 games so far. And now we're at a 3-3 series tie. And they're going to be duking it out on Sunday for that trip to the Western Conference Finals against either the Thunder or the Mavericks. But let's talk a little bit about last night's game because holy
Ooh,
smokes
yeah.
that was a wild game for a Timberwolves fan and a brutal game if you're a Nuggets fan.
Did the Nuggets just get worn out? Like just not even going above 70?
Evidently, well, the Timberwolves defense was just absolutely smothering in that game. Jokic was struggling to hit shots. Murray was struggling to hit shots. Pretty much everyone on the Nuggets was struggling. They did not shoot well. They put way too many threes up when they were not able to hit from three. They did not go back to the bucket as much as they should have. And that really just kept opening up more and more and more opportunities for the Timberwolves. But where I mentioned in the previous or 2 games ago, no, 3 games ago, where the Timberwolves lost it basically on that one drought in the first quarter, and then after that it was pretty consistent by both teams from there on out. Um, this time around, last night, the Nuggets lost it on droughts. In the first quarter, the Nuggets are up 9-2 on the Timberwolves, and then the Timberwolves go off on a 20-0 run in the first quarter.
Can't remember. I can't remember how much the drought was for UConn versus Illinois. That's what it reminds me of.
Back in March
Back
Madness,
back at March Madness. Yeah.
it had a similar vibe to it, but it's NBA, so that happens even less often. Um, and you don't see the same length of it because of the shorter shot clock. Droughts
Hmm.
don't last as long time wise. Um, and then we saw another similar magnitude run later in the game. Minnesota's leading 88-63, and then they go off on a 22-0 run, and that's in the fourth quarter. And after that, I mean, the game was basically ice before that. When you're leading by 25 in the fourth quarter, you got a pretty good shot at winning. Um, you're gonna win, and then you go off on a 22-0 run, and at that point, you're leading 110-63. Um, yeah, that's ice. That's as
Hmm.
ice as a game is going to get in the NBA. You're not going to find a game that is more ice than that. And that was actually the second largest win by a team facing elimination in NBA history, which is just wild that we're seeing. It's crazy to see that kind of defense in the NBA right now, and we only ever really see that in playoff time. We don't typically see that in the regular season. The defense comes out in playoffs. But yeah, the Timberwolves defense, holy smokes, absolute smothering last night. Nobody was getting anywhere for the Nuggets. And one of the things that I think made a big factor too here, I don't know that I've ever seen a crowd more into a game in the NBA than what I was watching last night with the Timberwolves. Like I could leave the room, to I don't know, go to the bathroom or something, and I couldn't hear the announcers, but if, Ant Man or Mike Conley drains a three, yeah, I could hear that. I could hear that coming from my speakers. That was nuts how loud that crowd was getting into that game. That was collegiate atmosphere type of vibe. That's like Dean Dome, North Carolina, uh, beating the tar out of Duke kind of atmosphere is what that was. Like that was
No, no Hilton Coliseum, Kansas.
that too.
Close, close, I'd say. Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't think Kansas was even the loudest I've this last year that I've seen Hilton. I think we were honestly louder against BYU,
Yeah, I
um,
agree.
but and K State. Uh,
K-State's,
we
and then Team Out East Wrestling.
yeah. Although that goes both directions because they bring a lot of
Oh
people to
yeah.
that too. That's a balanced crowd. Um, but yeah, I think it was kind of interesting. The second half of last night's game for the Timberwolves, it was mostly coming from the other pieces of the team and not Edwards. Edwards only had 8 points in the second half as opposed to the 19 that he led with in the first half. Um, so Edwards was on pace for just a ridiculously dominant night in the first half, and he cut it back a bit in the second half and let the rest of the team take charge. And they stepped up. And I guess that was Denver's only real answer was to try to shut down Ant Man. I mean, you put up 19 points in the first half. The defense for Denver has to try to respond to that. And it just opened up everything else for the rest of Minnesota. So it was a excellent, excellent game by Minnesota. Um, it's not flawless. They're still missing shots every now and then, but it was a very, very well executed game from the Timberwolves. that you really can't ask for much better, especially on the defense. You cannot ask for better on the defensive end to hold a team to only 70 points in the NBA. That's college scoring right there. Um, but yeah, upcoming for the Timberwolves here, Game 7 at the Nuggets, and so Blake, the crowd advantage has played an advantage in the latter two games of the series. This one's going to be at Ball Arena.
And not the Target Center.
It's not going to be at the Target Center. So can the Timberwolves get back to the formula that won in spite of the hostile crowd in games 1 and 2? Because in the first 4 games of the series, the crowds were not generally a factor. Um, the Timberwolves won games 1 and 2 on the road. The Nuggets won games 3 and 4 on the road. And then returned to Ball Arena. Nuggets won Game 5. Target Center. Timberwolves win Game 6. Back to Ball Arena for Game 7. So is it going to continue the trend of crowds playing a big factor? Or are we going to go back to what it was for the majority of this series, where the crowd was not necessarily a huge factor? Now, I think with it being a Game 7 and the extra weightiness to that, I think that's extra incentive for the crowd to get into it. So I think that the crowd will definitely play a factor. But if the Timberwolves can start off hot in spite of a hostile crowd, it will quiet them down.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this game very easily could be determined by the first 6 or so minutes.
Yeah, and I could say if the Timberwolves can achieve that to silence the crowd that early, then I think the crowd's just going to stay like that.
That's
unless
their biggest key to victory. Yeah.
Yeah, unless the Nuggets can go on a run and then eventually catch up, then the crowd's obviously going to get more hostile, and then that's what's going to play in a factor.
Right, and it's usually crowd energy that fuels runs in games, and lack of crowd energy is generally going to mean less runs for the Nuggets. So if we can see that from the Timberwolves, they will be in a really good spot to take Game 7. And I do think their roster is built. If they were playing on a neutral court, I think their roster is built to beat the Nuggets in this. We'll see how pieces like Jamal Murray and Naz Reid do in this game. I think they're going to be interesting pieces that, even though they're not necessarily the names of the franchise, they're not the Jokic and the Ant-Man or the Cat, but I think how they contribute, if either one of them has a big night, I think that will probably win the game for their respective team. If Naz Reid goes off for 19 points, I think it's pretty much guaranteed that the Timberwolves win it. Same thing with Murray. If Murray gets 17, 18, 19 points, I think it's probably a Nuggets win. But whoever wins this series, as I said a couple minutes ago, winner will advance to get the winner from Mavericks Thunder. Dallas leads that series 3-2. Game 6 will be tomorrow night, and I believe that's on ABC. We don't have.
Do we know?
We don't have a network assignment as of about 2 hours ago. We do not have a network assignment yet for Game 7 of Timberwolves Nuggets. I hope it's on TNT because I like their broadcasts better than ESPN.
Oh, TNT surpasses.
TNT's got a great broadcast crew for NBA. They have the best in the league. But that's how that's sitting right now. Let's we want to talk the NFL schedule releases here.
Yes.
So how many of these did you get to see? I'm curious. Or are you going in blind?
Not very much. Not very much. I'm going in blind. But I did see Chiefs would have a Week 7 rematch against the 49ers Super Bowl rematch.
Yeah, that's one that I believe I've got highlighted here to take a look at. Yeah, that's one of the ones I have highlighted to take a look at. These schedule releases are kind of entertaining, and some of them are better than others. The Chiefs they did the hydraulic press thing for their schedule release. Like the videos that you see when it pops up in your Discover tab on Snapchat or your Instagram Reels. It's kind of hard not to watch. They're just kind of mesmerizing. Um, but the Chiefs weren't even the only team to do that. Houston also did it. Um, Now, I think the Chiefs had a better reason to do it since you could say they actually crushed their competition last year. If they won the Super Bowl, I think you get a little bit more of a claim to that.
especially
Um,
twice in a row.
yeah, but that's where that's at. So for the Chiefs, the games that I want to look at here with the Chiefs, Week 1 versus the Ravens, we're going
That'll
right
be
back. That's
that'll be a rematch
that's AFC
from
title rematch.
AFC
That's
title. Yep,
gonna be
yep,
a
yep.
third. That's gonna be the Thursday night game to open the season. So all eyes are gonna be on that one. Two big teams right now coming off the last year, um, and I think that's gonna set a tone for both teams potentially for this season. I think that the winner of this game will probably have a better season in general than the loser of this game because that's the way week 2 tends to go. It sets the tone for a season, at least up until the trade deadline. And then you can see some pretty wild changes after that. But that I think is a big one. I also have week 2 highlighted for the Chiefs against the Bengals. That's going to be at home. That's going to be at Arrowhead as well. Um, Now, the Bengals were a little bit down last year, but they've been solid in the previous years before that. And I see no reason to believe why they can't take a step back up and be competitive, at least for a wild card in the AFC North, if not giving the Ravens a run for their money. No, I would still have the Ravens as the favorite to win the AFC North, but don't sleep on the Bengals here right now. That's a tough opening slate for the Chiefs right now in those first 2 weeks, Ravens Bengals. And there's heat between the Chiefs and the Bengals. Ever since they called Arrowhead Stadium Burrowhead, um, it's yeah, there's a chip on your shoulder with that game if you're Kansas City. Blake, I also have weeks 4 and 14 highlighted. Those games will be against the Chargers. Um, I don't know what to expect completely out of these games.
I mean,
There's a
neither.
there's a lot of mystery coming out of these. Um, and a lot of that has to do with coaching changes in Los Angeles. I just about said San Diego, but that has not been the case for years now. But anyway, Jim Harbaugh, new coach down in San Diego, and we've seen him be successful at the NFL level before with San Francisco. Um, so I think that brings a lot of interesting questions to the table. What is he going to do with Justin Herbert? We saw him turn Alex Smith into a pretty darn good quarterback when he was at San Francisco, and then Smith was a good contributor at Kansas City until Mahomes was ready. So I'm interested to see what Harbaugh ends up doing with the Chargers because I think it's a mixed bag. It could be a very mediocre season. I think it could be maybe they start cold and end hot. Maybe they're just really good and Harbaugh's got a good program down there. Or maybe he's lost his touch. I don't know. It could be any of the things. But keep an eye on those games because the Chiefs should still be a good team this year. We have no reason to believe that they won't. They did good with the draft. They picked up pieces that they needed to. So, how you perform against good teams tends to be a pretty strong indicator of who you are as a team. So, look for that week 4 and 14 against the Chargers. Week 7 against the 49ers, Super Bowl rematch. That's an easy one to highlight on the schedule for pretty much the same reason as the Ravens, minus the setting the tone thing. But that's your Brock Purdy versus Patrick Mahomes rematch, too. Um, Brock Purdy, Mr. Relevant. Iowa State fans around here love him. I want the 49ers to win pretty much every game except that one. Um, yeah, give me
Come on,
the
you can't set your fandom aside for a second.
nope, nope. I'm
Nah, he
loyal.
couldn't do it for a Super Bowl. He's still not doing it now.
I'm loyal. That's
Yes.
that's how that's gonna be.
And you know
Um,
who I'm loyal to?
Broncos country.
Depression.
Well, you don't have Russell Wilson anymore, so that's probably an upgrade because he is washed.
Oh yes,
We'll see what ends up happening out in
bro.
Pittsburgh with him.
Russell Wilson, probably one of the most washed athletes I've ever witnessed.
He's up there with the he's football's Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer is washed too.
Oh yeah.
And the final game for the Chiefs that I've got highlighted here, Week 11 at Buffalo. The last I don't know what 4 or 5 years, I think you pretty much have to highlight Kansas City Buffalo. Um, Anytime these two teams play each other, it's an entertaining game. Um, and even if it doesn't have any huge implications beyond that, even if one of these teams ends up struggling, I don't know what to expect of Buffalo without Stephon Diggs. Their wide receiver core took a huge hit after they traded him away. Josh Allen used Stephon Diggs was Josh Allen's best weapon. There's no doubt about that. And they just don't have anybody else of that caliber in their wide receiving core right now. So what Buffalo ends up doing, what they end up looking like, I think it's fair to assume that they take a step back, but they still play competitively in the games that they do lose. And I think Buffalo might end up being like a 9-8 type of team, but probably the best 9-8 team in the league. You catch what I'm throwing here?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the rest of our schedules that got revealed here. Let's take a look at the Vikings here. This one this one was a fun one. They released it the way when Apple releases or when Apple announces the release of a new iPhone. That's what the Vikings went for with theirs. With the team being the processor and all of that. That was
Oh
an
yeah.
that was an interesting one. I can't really say I expected that when I looked at it. And I opened it up and I was just like, this looks like Apple unveiling an iPhone. But that's what they were going for, which was real interesting. But games to highlight here, not quite as many as for Kansas City, but Week 3 versus the Texans. The Texans were a surprise team last year. They've got more pieces this year because they acquired Stephon Diggs to add to an already impressive receiving core. C.J. Stroud was good last year. He lived up to and I think you could say exceeded expectations in Houston. Um, so how do the Vikings do? With a new quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, um, and how do they use their receiving pieces? I think that makes an interesting matchup because they try to win in a similar way to Houston. So who's basically better at playing the same game? I think that's going to show you that dynamic there between Minnesota and Houston. I also have weeks 4 and 17 against the Packers and then weeks 7 and 18 against the Lions. I think it's going to be these three teams that are going to be in tight competition for the top of the NFC North. Do you have any other opinions on that? Who's going to be competing for the NFC North in your opinion?
Could I see? I know this is cliche, but could I see Vikings and Packers? Possibly.
So right now, I think the Lions are returning the most pieces. Um, they were the best last year, but the
And
Vikings
they very well could be this year again
the
still.
Vikings are the most impossible to predict team in the NFL.
Like one of
So
one of the most
they
impossible
could be
teams,
a
like in my
contender.
opinion.
They could be a contender, or they could win 3 games this season.
Yeah.
I think each possibility is
Yeah.
equally as likely right now, just because the
Also,
Vikings are the Vikings.
I did just take a skim at the schedule release video. That's absolute perfection.
It was
We have
clean.
we have a new iPhone. It's so incredibly powerful.
It was
Like they nailed it.
it was as if Tim Cook wrote it himself.
Yes.
Um,
Good morning. Good morning. Hello, it's Tim Cook.
yeah, that it really did have that vibe.
Yes.
Um, the last game that I have highlighted on the schedule here for the Vikings, Week 14 against the Falcons. And the reason I have this highlighted in particular, I think this one should be a win for the Vikings. But Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is now going to be at the Falcons, and assuming that he is playing, this ought to be interesting.
Oh yes.
Because let's be real, I don't think the Falcons are going to start Michael Penix over Kirk Cousins when they just signed Kirk Cousins to the big deal that they did. Um, the Falcons draft strategy still blows my mind how stupid it was. Um, your average Joe had a better chance of doing having a better draft than they did. Like you don't even have to know football, and you probably could have drafted better than that. But I don't know what was going on there. But assuming that Kirk Cousins is the one that's playing, and I think we have to say assuming because the Falcons' decision making is questionable at best right now. Um, that's going to be an interesting one. Kirk Cousins against his former team. Minnesota had been trusting him for a while and then didn't bring him back in this year. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Let's talk about the Bears schedule release here. Uh,
The pity bears.
DJ Moore is Ferris Bueller. That was brilliant. That was certainly one of the more creative schedule releases. I thought it was pretty entertaining. Um, and sending Packers, Lions, and Vikings to detention was just absolutely gold. Taking a shot at your rivals like that was excellent. I sneaking in an XFL joke though. That was wild, but not even the current version of the XFL. It wasn't the UFL. It wasn't the XFL conference in the UFL. It wasn't last year's iteration of the XFL. No, it was the 2020 pre-COVID version of the XFL that they took a shot at, which I don't know how you came up with that, but that's something different. But it just made it even better because like they used a baseball cap with the old blue and red XFL logo, um, and an XFL team that no longer exists, the LA Wildcats, who weren't in the final version of the standalone XFL. They're not in the UFL merger. No, they were in the 2020 version of the XFL pre-COVID. And to be honest, I want to know how they acquired the hoodie and the ball cap for it. Like, is Chicago Bears using eBay for asset acquisition?
If so, how much did they pay for it?
That's a good question. And how many of those are even on the market? Because it's not like LA had a ton of XFL fans buying a ton of merch, so there's probably not a ton of it out there. But somewhere along the line, the Bears acquired it for use. So that that would be an interesting one, and I would love to know how exactly the Bears acquired XFL merch from 4 years ago for a team that doesn't exist and had very few fans at all. Yeah, that is a story and a half. But let's look at games to highlight here for Chicago. Week 2 game at the Texans. I think there's a lot of similar reasons to highlight it that we talked about with the Vikings. Um, the Texans should be a fairly strong team, but have some vulnerabilities. It's not like they're the J.J. Watt Texans defense that we saw, 8 years ago type of thing. But I think it's a team that has some potential to be competitive. I should say it has more than just some potential to be competitive. The expectation is that they're going to be competitive, just not top notch. But if they do come out and be top notch, I'm not sure that it would shock anybody. So how other teams perform against them is going to be a fairly solid measuring stick. Um, I got week 8 at the Commanders and week 10 against the Patriots circled for the Bears. These are these were the top 3 picks in the NFL draft. They all selected rookie quarterbacks. So it's going to be Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels in week 8, and Caleb Williams versus Drake May in week 10. So which teams are best utilizing their rookie quarterbacks? That's a question here. Which teams are going to which teams are they going to fit in best? And I'm interested to see them head to head. because we're probably not going to get a JJ McCarthy versus Michael Penix head to head between Atlanta and Minnesota. But again, Falcons' decision making, we'll see what happens there. Um, of course, divisional rivalries. Weeks 11 and 18 against the Packers, and then week 13 and 16 against the Lions. If the Bears end up doing more than they're cracked up to be, or if Caleb Williams ends up actually becoming what he's cracked up to be, and I don't think he will, but I could be proven wrong, then those games against the Packers and the Lions late in the season are going to be big. Um, so that's what I've got for Chicago here. And let's stop and talk for a minute about the Packers schedule. Did you watch the Packers schedule release?
I could right now.
Well, we are recording a show right now, but we need to
Do I
talk about
acknowledging
this
it?
for a minute. So their theme was like pep rally auditions. Who's going to lead the pep rally or whatever? And the guest star slate for this was nuts. And this is including but not limited to here because there were more than just what I'm about to name off here. We had Lil Wayne, Braun Strowman, the WWE star,
Hmm.
John Kuhn, the former fullback, and his auditions were just John Kuhn, just him saying it for like 5 straight seconds, the way fans used to do it anytime he got a touch. Um, and while he's doing it, there's this brilliant moment where Jordan Love goes to check his watch, and he's not wearing a watch. It was brilliant. That was I didn't notice that until the second time I watched it, and the fine detail. And I don't know if that was intended or not, but wow, was that brilliant? That was I got a good laugh out of that. Carrie Ells was in that one. They brought in Aaron Andrews from Fox Sports. Um, they also had Joe Buck from ESPN.
Yep, I'm just kind of came across Joe Buck right now.
Yep. Uh,
Big Cat with Barstool.
Barstool Big Cat was on there. Solid Bears representative on there. Um, just giving the Packers the business. Why they chose to put that in there, not really sure, but okay. They balanced that out with Keyshawn Nixon roasting a bear loin. That was good. That was a nice dig at Chicago. Um, they had John Anderson from Sports Center on there, and then the Magic Man Don Majkowski to finally reveal their schedule graphic right at the very end.
Yeah, and he's like putting up like some kind of magic show.
Yep, the Magic Man with who can't do traditional magic, but he can do a schedule reveal. That is what we've got from him.
And then the screen just like
Yep, pops up like that. But games to highlight here for Green Bay. Week 3 at the Titans. I don't really know why. This game just calls out to me as one that has the potential to be very interesting. I don't really know what to expect out of the AFC South right now, aside from Houston being at least somewhat good. Like Houston should be a playoff team. Aside from that, I don't really know what all to expect from the Titans, the Jaguars, or the Colts. But the Titans have had some success in recent years, and maybe they end up being a decent team. Maybe they don't. I don't really know what to expect. But I don't necessarily know what to expect from the Packers early on in the season. I think the Packers are going to be a lot more solid at the end of the season. Um, but as to what we see early on, I think there's a lot of question marks. And I think week 3 at the Titans, it could be an interesting setting the tone kind of thing for Green Bay. I mean, the first 2 games are obviously going to do that as well. But it's just an interesting matchup of 2 teams that we don't necessarily know what to expect early in the season. And this is the kind of game that really helps a team build its identity, especially if the Packers struggle in the first couple games. Week 7 at the Texans. I really don't feel the need to elaborate on the Texans any further. I think I've done that pretty solidly for our last 2 teams. Um, Weeks 9 and 14 against the Lions. Again, I think these are 2 teams
obviously the
that
rivalry.
the rivalry in the NFC North is obvious, but again, these are two of the three teams I think very well could be competing for that top spot in the NFC North. Um, and I think the Lions might even have potential to be competing for a bye um, in the NFC side of the playoffs. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. I think they're likely to be up there competing with the 49ers. So that's probably what that's going to end up looking like because I don't think the NFC South certainly is going to be competing for a bye. The NFC South just is not strong. And to be honest, I think the NFC East is probably going to take a step back. I think the Eagles are starting to fade a little bit after last year. And let's be real, the Cowboys don't, they just don't do that. The Cowboys, they will have a good enough year to not get the bye, but they'll make the playoffs, is probably how it's going to go. I mean, do you see any reason at all to object to that?
Definitely not.
Um, yeah. And then, of course, week 12 is going to be at the 49ers for Green Bay. That's a pretty simple one to highlight again. They're defending NFC champions. Um, that's an easy yardstick to measure against for any team in the NFL. So that's what we're looking like there. Um, Before we get to MLB here, I do
Yeah,
want
while we're on the topic of football,
to. Yeah, EA.
well, EA, uh, I was working, so I wasn't able to watch it like at the time. So like before I got here, I did take a look at the trailer. Like you said before we started recording, it looks like a reskinned Madden,
With
which
all
I
of
can
the in-game purchases and everything.
yeah, which I could totally see. But
Wouldn't be happy with, but whatever.
I know,
That's the way games
but
are now.
yeah, especially sports games. But with all
It's
the
all about
traditions, well, yeah, you know
all
EA,
about the money.
but with all the like college traditions and like everything else, like there's been nothing seen about Iowa State yet, but I like after looking at like what we submitted to them on like, hey, have this in the game. Hopefully, hopefully I could trust them. I can trust them to do the right thing.
That is the hope. Um, a lot of this stuff has looked good so far.
Hmm.
Um, People are going absolutely nuts over the fact that Shadur Sanders is not on the cover of it, and I'm absolutely loving it because he does not deserve to be on the cover at all. He
No.
is the most overhyped player I have seen in college football probably in my lifetime. Because usually the guys that are really hyped up perform at least somewhat well.
Oh,
And Shadur Sanders, sorry, last year he was a joke. Like
just go with my Rocco Beck cover. Just
Colorado,
print out my.
Colorado last year was comic relief.
Oh, it
All
was.
the hype they got to get 4 wins,
No.
four, to not even be bowl eligible. Now they're going to be in the Big 12 in what will be a consistently better league than the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 was very competitive last year, but consistently they have not been particularly great. Um, I honestly I think they're going to get clowned on in the Big 12 too.
Oh, yep.
They still have to deal with Arizona and Utah. Now they get to add Oklahoma State and TCU and Iowa State and Kansas to that slate. I don't know if they play all of those teams this year because now we don't play everybody all the time anymore with the growing conference. But it's not exactly an easy path for Colorado, and throw West Virginia in that too.
Yeah, it's in West Virginia.
West Virginia's on the upswing right now.
Yes, they are.
I would not be shocked if West Virginia is at least a 7-win team this year. So I do want to talk a little bit conference realignment stuff. Now we're not seeing any actual changes yet, but more just on the Washington State Oregon State situation. Because if you're in the Big 12, it's worth paying attention to that. Washington State and Oregon State did tie up their TV deal. They did not disclose dollar amounts publicly yet, but most of the games will air on the CW. It'll be 13 games that they have on the CW. So they're going to get solid national exposure on a channel that is generally not going to be carrying a lot of other football that's going to be competing with those two teams. So they're going to be looking to build up Washington State, Oregon State pretty well. I believe the CW does have some ACC coverage that they are going to be doing as well, but they're going to be carrying games for Oregon State, Washington State every single week.
Yeah, and
Or well, no,
just think
not
about,
necessarily every week. When they're both on the road, they won't.
yeah. Look, you think about how much income the CW is going to make now.
Yeah, it's certainly going to improve their views, and it's going to improve the global, or not necessarily global, but the national audience
Yeah,
for Oregon State and on Washington State, and build them into bigger brands. And they're going to have two games that'll be on either Fox or FS1, one per team. So it's either Oregon State and Oregon will be on either Fox or FS1, and then same deal with Washington State versus Texas Tech. So Fox did get in on the deal a little bit, but it's primarily a CW deal, and that's how that's going to be going. But yeah, y'all ready for OSU and Wazoo to have the most national exposure of all teams, because they are going to have the most games out of any team on your local broadcast networks that you don't need cable, you don't need a live TV streaming service to get. You can watch their games, nearly all, if not all of them, depending on if any of them are on FS1 versus Fox. If none of their games are on FS1 and both of the Fox owned games end up being on Fox, and every single one of those games will be watchable with a $13 TV antenna that you can buy at Walmart, that you don't have to pay a monthly subscription for.
great.
So literally anybody with a TV and $13 can watch this game, or these games.
Like $13
Minimum
dollars
13.
One time payment, by the way.
Yeah, minimum. Yeah, it's 13 games minimum.
Nursing homes can watch this game.
Yep. Your grandpa can figure out how to watch this game because it's using the exact same technology that he used to watch games when he was younger, when TV was only in 3 channels and black and white. That's how easy it's gonna be to access these Oregon State, Washington State games this year. So it's a good look, and they're getting way better exposure than let's be real. Before the Pac-12 fell apart, what were they looking at for media? Exclusive streaming on Apple TV Plus. They wouldn't have gotten nothing for exposure. Their most exposure they would have gotten was road games during the non-con, when they'd get on cable channels. That's it. So this is huge for Washington State and Oregon State in terms of being able to grow their value in the next year, in order to try to get a conference invite. Because doing this is going to grow their value. No doubt about it. It's going to grow their value. With that easy access to the CW and to Fox. Alrighty, let's get to talking baseball. Let's get to talking baseball. I've been waiting. You know I love talking baseball. Let's as usual. Let's start with the Twins here. Previous week, not so hot. 2 wins, 4 losses. They went 2-1 at the Blue Jays. That one loss to the Blue Jays, they blew a 7-1 lead. Woods Richardson allowed 5 runs in the start, and then the bullpen allowed an additional 5 runs. 7 consecutive runs by the Blue Jays between the 5th and 7th inning, and the Twins never responded. The Twins did not score 5th inning on after. So that was an ugly game for the Twins. You know, I remember looking at that score early on. It was like 8-3 or something like that, bottom of the 3rd. And I was like, okay, we're looking good for a Twins win here. And then I look at the score later in the game, and I'm like, what happened? The bullpen completely collapsed. The hitting totally stopped. Completely fell apart from Minnesota in that game. Not a good look at all in that second game against the Blue Jays. That was on Saturday. And then 0-3 against the Yankees. Only scored 1 run in that entire series. The Twins got shut out twice. And that was at Target Field. That was ugly, ugly, ugly week for the Twins. So I think it's pretty safe to say that the Twins are no longer the hottest team in baseball. They're back to third in the AL Central with that 24-19 record. They're definitively behind the Royals now. Same number of losses, 2 less wins. So, but upcoming for the Twins, they've got potential to bounce back here. 3-game series at the Guardians, who have been slipping a little bit lately. The Guardians have not done particularly well. Both of these teams just lost series to the White Sox. The Guardians lost a 3-1 series to the White Sox, and the Nationals lost a 2-1 series to the White Sox. So that's the White Sox's previous week for you.
They lost to the White
Sox. I don't have to dig into that too deep when we get to the White Sox now. But it could be a mixed bag. Maybe the Guardians and the Nationals bounce back. The Guardians have been inconsistent, so the Guardians might play really well here in this next series. The Nationals are not particularly good, and I think that there's no chance that the Twins don't get at least 1 win out of them. But I think for the Twins this week, expect somewhere between 2 to 5 wins. I think that maybe the Twins, go 1-2, or get swept against the Guardians, or maybe they go 2-1 against the Guardians. I don't think they will sweep the Guardians. And against the Nationals, I think they're guaranteed, again, at least 1 win. They could potentially sweep the Nationals, though. The Nationals are not a good team. So, White Sox, as I previously mentioned here, 3-1 series win against the Guardians, 2-1 series win against the Nationals. That Nationals was a good one for the White Sox. They did well. Blake, they shut out the Nationals in both of their wins. The Nationals hitting is bad.
And we're talking about the White Sox, right?
Yeah. The White Sox, who have somehow played halfway decent in the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
Eric Fetty and Garrett Crochet earned respective wins in those 2 shutouts. And Fetty is now 4-0 on the year. He has yet to take a loss as a starting pitcher. Now, the rest of his stats are not particularly great, but when he's been on the hill, the rest of the team is generally working together, which is a good look for him. And the White Sox have found a bit of an identity here. 5-2 in the last week, 8-5 in the last 2 weeks, and their only series loss in the last 2 weeks was when they went down to Tampa playing at the Trop against the Rays. Every other series they've had in the last 2 weeks, they have won. Now, it has been a bit of an easier stretch, so we'll, aside from the Guardians, who are leading the AL Central right now, but it's going to get tougher here for the White Sox. They got a 3-game series at the Yankees, who did just sweep the Twins.
Mm-hmm.
And they got a 3-game series at the Blue Jays, who are certainly a better team than the White Sox. And then after that, they're going to begin a 4-game series against the Orioles. So, yeah, their schedule is about to get a lot tougher. I don't see any more than 3 wins in the next week out of 7 games for the White Sox. I think they could potentially maybe get a win at the Yankees. They could potentially get a win, maybe 2, at the Blue Jays. And they could potentially get a win in that first game against the Orioles. I think they're going to get at least a couple wins in there. I don't think that they're going to, go 1-6 here. But I think the ceiling for them this week is 3 wins. That's just a tough schedule. The Royals here. Last week, 3-1. They finished their series at the Angels. Adam Frazier earned his first home run as a Royal. So I mean, kudos to him, I guess. Tough to say as a Twins fan, but you know, that's that's just a respectable thing to do. Get your first home run with the franchise. I hope they save the ball for you. And that gave the Royals a ninth inning win, handing Angels closer Carlos Estevez an L instead of a save in that game. Long after the Royals fans in Kansas City had probably went to bed because 2 hour time difference for a night game. No, that's generally how that goes. And then the Royals went 1-2 in Seattle at the Mariners. We had a rare instance of an umpire leaving a game on Wednesday.
Yeah, not something you want to see in this instance.
Foul balls at this level, they're coming off fast. But
Yeah.
umpire Jim Wolf, he was behind the plate that day. He took a foul ball to the face mask in the top of the fifth inning. After meeting with umpires during the middle of the inning, Wolf left the field, and first base umpire Ryan Blakeney put on the plate gear and took over behind the plate for the rest of the game. And they went with a 3-man crew as opposed to a 4-man crew. You take a foul ball to the face mask like that. The natural assumption is that they're worried about a concussion or something like that. I mean, the face mask is meant to protect you, but if it hits you hard enough, it's still something you got to worry about.
Could definitely shake you up.
It can. Again, if it hits you hard enough, it'll rattle your noggin a little bit. It's not something we want to be seeing, but that's occupational hazard if you're an umpire. So, but yeah, upcoming for the Royals here, 3-game series against the A's, and then a 3-game series versus the Tigers. That Monday night game will be on Fox Sports 1. Weaker schedule for the Royals this week. I'm seeing 4 to 5 potential wins for Kansas City this week. I don't think they sweep the Tigers. I think a sweep of the A's is possible, although the A's are not nearly as bad as they were last year. They have been a lot better. So I think the A's could potentially squeak a win out against the Royals, but the Royals are certainly a better team than the A's. And I think there is some potential for the Tigers as well to get 2 wins against the Royals. That AL Central is tight. It's been a good league so far this year, but I think 4 to 5 is the potential for Kansas City. I guess maybe on the off chance they only get 3 wins, but I do think that the Royals are looking at potentially 4 to 5 wins this week. The Brewers were looking good this week. 3 wins and 1 loss is what they finished their series against the Cardinals with, and then 2 wins, 1 loss versus the Pirates. And Wednesday's win against the Pirates in that rubber game, 10-2, 5 home runs by 5 different players.
That's great.
The whole team was hitting well. Contreras, Ortiz, Sanchez, Churio, and Frelick all went yard in that game. Blake, just to remind you, going yard and hitting dingers means the same thing.
What? Really?
Yep. At least this time around it is baseball.
Yes.
We are talking about baseball this time and not softball.
No.
This isn't softball.
Wait,
Last
this is
time it was
baseball.
softball.
Okay. I get it.
Yeah, that.
I'm glad we keep this as a running joke.
We'll see how long it lasts. I haven't mentioned it since then, so it's been a hot minute.
Yeah.
If you need to go back and watch that clip from before, we have a short of that on the channel.
Yeah. It's our first short.
Is it the first one? It might be. But
I
yeah.
think it is, yeah.
Anyway, in that same game with the 5 home runs, Contreras and Frelick each had 3 hits apiece on a dominant day at the plate. Contreras was 3 for 5. Frelick was 3 for 4. The Brewers hit really well in that game. They had 13 hits. Just excellent day. Prior to that, Rice Hoskins was placed on the 10-day injured list with a strained hamstring. Strained it, rounding first base. prior to that. He's expected to be out for 2 to 4 weeks. Um, but upcoming for the Brewers here, 3 game series at the Stros, 3 game series at the Marlins. Looking like another good week for the Brewers to not have to worry too much about the Cubs sneaking up on them for first in the division. I'm thinking 4 to 6 potential wins for the Brewers this week. The Astros and the Marlins are both bad teams right now. And I think either team has the potential to maybe get one win against the Brewers, but I don't think either team is going to get a series win against the Brewers. And I think both teams very well could get swept by the Brewers.
No, these these
I,
are these are easy series for the Brewers.
yeah, I like the Brewers probably to win 5 games. Getting on a 6 game win streak is tough, but I think six with this scheduling is certainly possible. Um, let's take a look at the Cubs here, who are definitely not gonna sneak up on the Brewers for first in the division this week.
No.
Um, they have another series against the Braves upcoming, but they're basically gonna have a repeat of the last week as far as their series. Only this time around, they're gonna be at Wrigley instead of on the road. But they went 2-1 at PNC Park against the Pirates. The attendance was high for that Paul Skeens debut. They had 35,000 people show up, sandwiched in between 16,500 and 18,500 fans in attendance on the Friday and Sunday, respectively. That's about pretty much all that was notable from that. It was a high-scoring game, and Paul Skeens didn't take the L. About all that was notable from that game. Then after that series at the Pirates, they went 1-2 at the Braves. Starting pitching continued to look really, really good. Javier Assad earning the lone W over the Braves in that 7-1 blowout. Now that followed up losing in 2 different shutouts to the Braves, and I'm not really sure anybody expected the Braves to bring Chris Sale back into prominence. After when he was done at the Red Sox, we all thought he was washed. But so far this year, Chris Sale, 6 wins, 1 loss, 61 strikeouts so far, and a 0.89 WHIP. He's doing pretty darn good in Atlanta right now. And you look at that WHIP number and 61 strikeouts, he's not just being carried by good hitting either. Like if we look at the White Sox, we were talking about Fetty kind of being carried a little bit by good hitting. That is not the case right now for Chris Sale in Atlanta. He is pitching legitimately good. And the Cubs followed that Braves series up. They started another series at home against the Pirates last night. They did take an L. They will start this next week here tonight. 3 more games against the Pirates. And then after that, they will have 3 more games at home against the Braves.
I hate to interrupt this part, but with my current position at the Iowa Cubs, they have to be producing for the team out east.
I told you to rig it.
No, forget.
I told you to rig it.
It was my first time in the position that they had me on, so I was gonna mess up. But
Intentionally.
I will say their crowd. Nah, Iowa State could definitely sell out Principal Park easily if we had a
If
series
we
down
brought
there.
baseball back, we could sell out anywhere because
Yes.
people would go nuts for it. There are so many Cyclones that want to see baseball come back. Now we'd probably sell out a park for like 2 games and be back to regular levels of college attendance in the Midwest. But it would be awesome to do.
But last night, the team out east had everything they wanted to walk off this game, and they swung and missed. It's like bases loaded, bottom of the ninth, down by 1. Like I was just having a ball back there.
Dude, you know what would be fun to do if the Cyclones ever were to bring baseball back?
Hmm.
They should do a state of Iowa tour and play a series in Des Moines at Principal Park. Play a series in Cedar Rapids at Veterans Memorial, and play a
I
series
like that.
uh, in Quad Cities at the Riverfront.
Quad City, yep.
That are three minor league teams in the state of Iowa. I think
That'd be
that'd be a
incredible.
ton of fun.
Yes.
That'd be a ton of fun. And if they hadn't, demolished the Field of Dreams Park in Dyersville, I would say, play there
I
too.
even forgot about that too.
I would say play there too, but they took that
But that
down,
won't
so
that won't be
that
up for
one
a while.
that won't happen. But man, they need to bring it back. We need to see Iowa State baseball again. It's been 24 years. It's longer than we've
Maybe
been alive. Iowa State has not
maybe
played a baseball game in the time that we've been alive.
maybe the next athletic director.
I hope so. But that will probably be a while because Iowa State does not have much reason to get rid of Pollard. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
boosting
we definitely don't right now, but
men's
Pollard's gonna make it
basketball is
smart.
positioned to be in the best place it's ever been.
Yes.
Women's basketball has the potential to be positioned in the best place it's ever been. Football is the most consistently good that it's ever been. And those are and wrestling is back to prominence. It's not the dynasty that we had during the 70s, but it's Kevin Dresser's bringing Iowa State wrestling back. So I like to see that stuff coming from our athletic department right now. But yeah, I really want baseball back. I really, really want baseball back. Um,
You get
but
club baseball. Take it or leave it.
it ain't the same, and there's nowhere to sit. Cap Tim Field doesn't have much for seating anymore because they tore down the old stands. The old softball diamond stands are still there, but they tore down the ones at Cap Tim. So that's how that is. But anyway, let's get to our last MLB team here. The St. Louis Cardinals, who still suck. They're still the league's retirement home. They have injuries. That's how that goes. Uh,
Avengers.
as we previously mentioned, they went 1-3 in their series in Milwaukee. Their lone win in Milwaukee snapped a 7-game skid. Before that, Goldie had been on a 1 of 34 hitting during May slump, and he led the fifth inning with only his third home run of the season. So yeah, when the star of your franchise is not doing so hot, I mean it's Goldie and Arenado that are the stars of St. Louis, and they're not lifting the team to what it needs to be. Um, the Cardinals did go 2-1 with the Angels though, who are in a similarly craptastic position. With Mike Trout essentially being the entire team in Anaheim. So, but for the Cardinals, they got 3 games upcoming here for the Red Sox. 3 games against the Orioles. All of those will be at Busch Stadium. I think the Cardinals maybe could win 1 game against the Red Sox. I think they're going to get swept against the Orioles. Um, Now, could they potentially sneak a second win in there somewhere? Yes. I think 1 to 2 wins for the Cardinals here in this next week. It's not looking pretty. Not a good time to be a fan of the St. Louis Cardinals. But it's always a good time to follow the Cornfield Sports Pod on
Oh,
Twitter at C Sports Pod. Blake, where can they find you at?
as always, you can find me at BlakeAttack1846 on Twitter.
Twitter, you can find me at SFMattISU. Tap the follow button on Spotify, the plus button on Apple, subscribe on YouTube and Rumble, and hit that little bell thing for notifications when we release our new episodes.
I know you'd like notifications on your phone. This was Blake Peterson.
I'm Matt Menson, and this has been the Cornfield Sports Pod.